And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor for the Western Journal. It is so good to be back with you. I feel like it's been 3 weeks since at least I've been on the show, and I miss you guys when I'm not on the show. Joining me today, Tara Snyder. She's an assignment editor for the Western Journal, and Grant Atkinson. He is a writer for the Western Journal. We're covering big stuff in the news today, as we normally try to do. I think we've got some particularly interesting things going on, including issues with Ted Cruz, who's acting like a rhino. We're going to be talking about an absolutely horrible attack on the United States Capitol, terrorist attack on the United States Capitol that happened in 1983 that you probably never even heard about and was dramatically, radically worse than what we saw on January 6th of 2021. If you don't know about that, we're going to educate you about it here in a few minutes and give you some information you can use when talking with your liberal friends. We're also going to be talking about crazy things happening at the Supreme Court right now. The Supreme Court is in session. They're talking about vax mandates. Grant's going to be talking about truly insane comments coming from Justice Sotomayor and the implications that those might have for us in our everyday lives. And there are implications. But first off, as I alluded to a moment ago, Ted Cruz acting like a rhino. Tucker Carlson called him out on his show last night. The exchange was, I don't know if explosive is the word, but when you call a sitting United States senator a liar or say he's lying directly, that's pretty big stuff. And Tara, you've got that. Take it away.
Yeah. So Ted Cruz went on with Tucker Carlson. And as we all know, there's a special reason why Tucker Carlson is so popular. And that's because Tucker Carlson just doesn't hold back. And as Josh just said, he really didn't hold back last night. And it was actually a little bit uncomfortable to watch when I watched it through the first time, because he's literally going like completely ham on Ted Cruz and just not letting him wiggle on it.
He was going ham on him?
Yes.
He was going ham? Okay.
Yeah.
He was going ham on him.
Going ham, yeah. That's my word I'm going to use for today.
Ham.
Anyways, maybe you'll see that he was really going ham on him if we can bring up the clip.
What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers. Now, I think you and I both agree that if you assault a police officer, you should go to jail. That's who I was talking about. And the reason the phrasing was sloppy is I have talked dozens, if not hundreds of times. I've drawn a distinction. I wasn't saying that the thousands of peaceful protesters supporting Donald Trump are somehow terrorists. I wasn't saying the millions of patriots across the country supporting President Trump are terrorists. And that's what a lot of people have misunderstood that comment.
Wait a second, but hold on. What you just said doesn't make sense. So if somebody assaults a cop, he should be charged and go to jail. I couldn't agree more. We've said that for years. But that person's still not a terrorist. How many people have been charged with terrorism on January 6th? Like, why'd you use that word? You're playing into the other side's characterization that, as Joe Kent just explained, allows them to define an entire population as foreign combatants. And you know that. So why'd you do it?
So, yeah, that was just a little tiny clip of that whole segment, but it just got really bad. And one of the things that he brought up that I actually had no idea about was that Ted Cruz had been, considered as a sitting member of the United States Supreme Court. And so I guess I just kind of want to ask you guys, do you agree with Tucker that this was an intentional thing that Ted Cruz said and that he should be held accountable for it?
Yeah, I think I do. And I don't understand why he would even try to backtrack like that. Well, I do understand why, because I don't understand the way that he backtracked, because like Tucker said, it doesn't make any
badly,
sense. Yeah.
The way he backtracked.
I don't know why he doesn't have a PR team that's telling him, this line of reasoning that you're using is obviously false. It obviously doesn't make sense. And Tucker's going to call you out for it, just like he did. My favorite part, I think, during that clip, Tucker called him out, which is great. But even before that, as Ted is like telling his little story, Tucker, like, his face is so good. He's just like very confused, and he's like, what's going on here? Like, why is he saying this? This makes no sense. And that's exactly what he says to Cruz, is what you just said still makes no sense. And so I think, obviously there's a clear reason why Cruz would try to backtrack, is because he's getting slammed and he's going to lose support from the right side of the aisle. But the way that he went about it made no sense at all.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me that he would go and say something like that, especially in the era of where different senators and congressmen are going to get canceled. Like, I know Lindsey Graham has really been brandished as a rhino, and I think it's kind of dangerous territory. But what do you think, Josh?
So I totally understand why he tried to backtrack, and kudos to Cruz for at least saying, "Hey, I was wrong." The problem is that he, as immediately after he said, "I was wrong," he said something else that was wrong. He said, "Oh, Tucker, look, I did not mean it the way it has been interpreted. I did not mean to say this. I was using a term that I have always used for people who have attacked police officers. I've always called people who attack police officers terrorists. I wasn't talking about everybody at the mall that day. I was talking about the very few people there who attack police officers. As far as I know, no one has been charged with attacking a police officer so far, but Cruz didn't mention that. The problem is that people who attack police officers aren't usually terrorists. Drug dealers who attack police officers, they're very bad people. They're scumbags. They're dirtbags. They're not terrorists. You need essentially three elements for something to be terrorism or for you to be a terrorist. First off, the target needs to be a civilian target. All right? Police definitionally aren't civilians. Second, the target needs to be seen to have been picked randomly. It doesn't need to be a target that people would think, "Oh, that's ripe for terrorism." It needs to be almost a random feeling target. And the reason for that is the third thing you need for terrorism. The point behind it is to inspire fear in everyday people's lives. The feeling that, "Oh my gosh, that could have been me. I could have been in the World Trade Center that day. I could have been on that bridge. I could have been in this mall," whatever the case may be. So Ted Cruz coming back and saying, "Look, I just was saying terrorist because I call people who attack police terrorists." It's like Ted Cruz saying, "I didn't mean to. I always lie about terrorism. I always lie about it. I always call people terrorists who are not actually terrorists." It's such a boneheaded response. Ted, thank you for being on. I think you were honest about it, but the honesty also had sort of a boneheaded backing to it or foundation to it.
It's just, it goes back to just the redefining of words, which is like kind of what we've seen time and time again. I mean, like throughout 2016, we saw the word Nazi pop back up and everyone was talking about, "Oh, Trump's a Nazi, Trump's that." And Nazi used to be someone who hated Jewish people and was a supporter of Hitler or worked under Hitler.
And socialists. Remember, socialist.
And now
National
it's just
socialist.
And now that's "Oh, you're a Nazi if you're conservative, you're this, you're that." And then yesterday we saw the exact same thing with Kamala Harris, who called January 6th basically the equivalent of Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And so it's just like this huge mischaracterization of so many things at this point.
So we were talking about this at the pre-meeting for the show, and one of the ideas that came up is that there's a very specific reason they're talking about 9/11 and Pearl Harbor and linking January 6th to those things. It's because those things live forever in the public consciousness. The Pearl Harbor is seared in people's consciousness. 9/11 is seared in their consciousness. And the left is hoping that they can sear January 6th in their consciousness. Pearl Harbor is related to the Japanese in World War II. 9/11 is related to Islamic fascism. And they are hoping that they can turn January 6th into a date that is linked to terrorism, which was Tucker's point. Why are you playing into that? And then linking that terrorism to conservatives. That's why they're doing that.
Yeah.
I cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, and I think it goes to like this broader point, because we've now seen this kind of schism within Republican conservative movements. And I think that this goes between the example I just gave you with Lindsey Graham and things like that. And so I just am curious for you both, like, what establishes someone who's conservative and just a Republican? Because I think there's a lot of people who will claim to be conservative but are really just blanket Republicans. What do you think, Grant?
I think it's honestly a little bit dangerous the way that the Republican Party and the furthest right conservatives have been really quick to write people off, like Ted Cruz, like Lindsey Graham. And I'm not trying to defend Ted Cruz's comments. I think what he said yesterday was terrible, and it made no sense. It was untrue, and it made no sense from a political standpoint. But I think a lot of hardcore Republicans have gotten a little bit lost, and if you're not as hardcore as me, then I'm not going to support you, and you're basically a rhino. I think that can be dangerous because then you're isolating a lot of people. I mean, Ted Cruz has historically been one of the more far-right politicians that we have, and he made a mistake yesterday. I don't know if I buy his explanation, but he said something he shouldn't have said, and that happens sometimes. I feel like maybe there should be a little bit more grace, possibly, not for the specific comment. I think his comment should be condemned, but to say that everything that Ted Cruz now does, he's no longer a Republican, he's no longer a real conservative, I think that's a little too far, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question, the answer to which not only can we not get into we can barely scratch the surface of in a 10-minute segment. We could spend days talking about that. Hopefully we're electing people not based on party, but based on the ideas that they ascribe to. And traditionally, the Republican platform has aligned more or less with basic conservatism. Smaller government, lower taxes, pro-family, recognizing the essentiality of faith in everyday life to help hold society together. I think Ted believes in all of those things. I think he is fundamentally a conservative. The problem is he's also a politician, and I don't think Ted is guilty here of doing anything that probably any other politician before all was said and done that any other politician has done. What was the quote from The Dark Knight? You either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you're a politician, you live long enough that you're going to compromise yourself in some way, shape, or form, and you're going to have to try to save yourself, and that's what we watched there. I think he used a term he thought would get him kudos among the crowd that was watching and the people who were tuned in there. And then thanks to the internet, everyone heard it. And he's now experiencing the wrath of the electorate as should happen. But it's awfully hard, though, because a lot of people in America, since the education system has been essentially destroyed, you've got people in America who don't understand why ideas are important. And so then you've got people, but those folks can vote. And so you've got people running for office who are essentially trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator while still staying true to their ideals. It's very hard. I don't envy the job Ted or anybody else has to do. If I envied it, I would probably have run for office at some point, but it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. There are very few people who pull it off. Ron Paul did. I think Rand Paul has. I imagine before all said and done, Marjorie Taylor Greene will probably be one of these people who pulls it off and just never compromises at all. But the vast majority of people do, and then they have to try to dig themselves out, which is what Ted was doing. Okay, good stuff with Cruz. Tucker, as always, just being heroic. So yesterday, if you turned on the TV to watch anything at all, you probably saw something about January 6th. And it is a date that the media, of course, would say lives in infamy, just like Pearl Harbor. Like we were talking about a minute ago, I think the left and the media especially are trying to directly link January 6th to things like Pearl Harbor and 9/11, because that will give them not just a politically handy tool for 2022 or 2024. They think it'll be handy for 2046, whatever that. I mean, they think it'll be handy for generations going forward. That's what they're trying to do. They are trying to brand this into American minds. So it got me to thinking, gosh, has there been anything else like that in American history? And you know what? There have. Now, a lot of you who are watching, I think, are probably old enough to remember the two things I'm going to talk about here in a moment. What was interesting is in our staff meeting this morning where we were talking about the show, I mentioned this, and no disparagement meant, but neither Tara nor Grant had heard of the main story I'm going to tell you. And that's because it wasn't useful for the media and the left to put the story out there. Back in 1983, this was in, I think, November. You know what's wonderful, folks? Just as an aside, the best thing in the world is when you're 5 minutes from going on air and the printer prints your stuff out too big so that you have 90% of what you need, but the 10% right here, totally gone.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just fantastic. But back on, let's see here. This was on November 7th, 1983. November 7th, 1983. The Capitol switchboard got a very ominous sounding call. About 15 minutes later, a literal bomb went off that blew not a dent, but a gaping hole in the Capitol building's wall. It's not a wall outside. This is not a fence. This is the actual wall of the building. It blew a hole in the wall. If you haven't heard of that, it's no mistake. You weren't supposed to ever hear about it. Yeah, it happened in 1983, but it never served the media's purpose to bring it back up. After all, it doesn't hurt conservatives. It doesn't hurt Christians. It doesn't hurt Trump supporters. It hurts the left. And the reason for that is it wasn't a random bombing. There was a group called the... it's nice when the group's name is hidden in the 10% that didn't get printed. The Black Liberation Army, there it is. Thankfully, they mentioned it elsewhere. The Black Liberation Army, and they were sort of an offshoot of the Weather Underground. They carried out several other bombings up to, I think it ran into about 20 different bombings over time. Now, we were talking about this in the meeting before the show, and it just occurred to me, gosh, if I'm weighing out consequences, if I'm trying to figure out which scenario is worse, we've got one scenario where we have Nancy Pelosi's mail stolen. Okay? And we've got one scenario where a 15-foot hole was blown in the Capitol building.
Yeah, but was the guy who blew a 15-foot hole in the Capitol building wearing a Viking
I knew you were
garb?
going to ask. That's a legitimate question, my friend. A legitimate question. When you wear an animal pelt, it really makes it more significant. No, but that is the point. When you look at, again, I've said this on this show so many times. Go back and watch the footage of what happened on January 6th. Not all the footage that they showed yesterday. Look at the footage of what was happening in the Capitol building. And you have my favorite kind of terrorists there. You have the kind of terrorists that stand in between stanchions. Stanchions are those things at the bank that keep you in line. You have terrorists literally standing in the stanchions. And as we talked about earlier today, that's not terrorism. So contrast that against a giant gaping hole being blown in the wall of the Capitol, which is sacred ground according to the media. And by the way, there are a few people around who are more patriotic than I am, but seriously, the stuff that goes on in the Capitol building, the smarm, the sex, the wheeling and dealing, the smoke-filled rooms, really, that's sacred ground. But this is not the only case. I mentioned the Weather Underground a minute ago, and many of you who are watching know about the Weather Underground. For those of you who don't or who may have forgotten, remember the Weather Underground was behind 25 or 26 significant terrorist bombings across the country back in the 60s and 70s. They hit a military recruitment center. They hit the U.S. State Department, and they hit several other official and unofficial places. When you look at the history of the left, terrorism is endemic. Terrorism comes with the left. And maybe a more convenient way to say it, or a more useful way to say it is that terrorism comes with statism. The idea that the state should be all powerful. Where else do we see terrorism today? Well, we see it in the Middle East. We see it with radical Islam. Radical Islam is a fascist statist movement. There's the machinations of the groups behind those things are different, but their methods as far as controlling the entire state and using terror to gain that control is no different, whether you're talking about Islamofascism or you're talking about leftism. So it is not surprising at all that this comes from the left. And again, just to put a fine point on it, the best example the media has right now of something like that happening among conservatives was a rally that turned rough on January 6th, where people did trespass into the Capitol. There's a legitimate question whether or not you can trespass on taxpayer property that you funded, and stole some mail. That's the best example they've got. We have bombing after bombing after bombing. We have the 100 million plus who were killed by leftism in the 20th century. I don't know how many were killed by conservatism, but it wasn't 100 million.
No way.
Yeah.
The closest thing they'll try to do is march out Pinochet, and that's fraught with problems. So anyway, on the anniversary, just after the anniversary, after the ridiculous media January 6th orgy that took place yesterday, I want to remind people of what the left's actually capable of and what they have done. The left and the media wish that what happened on November 7th, 1983 happened on January 6th, 2021, but it didn't. Again, some mail was stolen and some people got jostled.
And I think the fact, we talked about this too, the fact that neither one of Tara nor I remembered that this happened in 1983 or had heard about it before. You may say, like, okay, it was a bombing in the Capitol, people didn't die, so it's not an event worth remembering. I would fight back on that a little bit. I think it is an event worth remembering, but I would also say, if you don't think that that event is worth remembering, then how can you possibly say that January 6th is the same as Pearl Harbor? I wasn't alive when Pearl Harbor was bombed, but that doesn't mean I don't remember it. And yesterday, Kamala Harris said that January 6th should be remembered in the same light as Pearl Harbor. So if you're going to remember that as one of the most infamous attacks ever.
Hang on for just a second. I got to tell you, they lost a lot of mail in Pearl Harbor. They really did lose a lot of mail.
Much,
they lost some mail on January 6th. They lost a lot of mail at Pearl Harbor. Go ahead.
Well, it's just sad, too, because when you think about how many people actually died, like I know like 4 people passed away on January 6th, and a couple of them.
They passed during, but it was these were not, other than Ashley Babbitt. Other than Ashley Babbitt, yeah.
Like there were like some other like shadier things that were going on.
Attack, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we think about Pearl Harbor, and that's 2,400 people. Then you think of 9/11, and that's thousands of people. And when Kamala was talking yesterday, I think for me, like the one image that, because obviously I was a baby when 9/11 happened, but the image that always sticks in my head when I think of 9/11, I think it just haunts me the most, is when I saw footage of people jumping like out of the windows. Oh. And I just like, that's what's devastating to me, is because it's like when I just like truly think about 9/11 and I think about being one of those people forced to make the decision to jump out the window or burn to death because of the jet fuel and all of the exhaust and everything. It's like that is just unusually cruel and just cheap. It's just, it's so sick to me. And I just could not, I was left speechless. Like I'm still speechless now. I don't understand the level of cognitive dissonance one has to achieve in just mental gymnastics to try and make those on the same playing field. It's just sad.
Somehow AOC being in a different building and being scared is on par with people flinging themselves out of a building, out of a burning building.
And I think that this comes to like what leftism is, because if you would have made this comparison, like let's say 10 years ago, I think people would be more like us, where we're like, how can you make that comparison? But leftism has become about intersectionality, who has the most oppression points, who's the most like hurt and harmed. And so I think when you give like Congress members who truly don't have any room to talk, who are driving their Teslas into Congress every day, when you give them something to be like, oh my gosh, I was in a terrorist attack and I was harmed, that's something that they can always point to, you know? And it's because we've become so self-obsessed with how have I been set back in society? Who's hurt me? What do I have to work through? I mean, I just think that's what's contributed to it.
Yeah, they look through any event. They look at it through the lens of victimization. How can I be the victim? From this, that's good. That's good. All right. So from Ted Cruz and Tucker to the Weather Underground, the Senate bombings. Now let's deal with another branch. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. Hopefully you're paying attention today. If you're watching. If you're at the Western Journal's website, westernjournal.com, you know about what's going on with mandate arguments before the Supreme Court. Grant's going to take that on and focus on some particularly, we were talking before right as the camera was about to go on, and we were saying what Sotomayor said is literally crazy. This is nuts. This is not like a bad example. This is nuts. Take it away, Grant.
Yeah, so as Josh said, the Supreme Court has been hearing a case on Biden's vaccine mandates today, both the OSHA vaccine mandate for the large companies as well as some other vaccine mandates having to do with healthcare workers. It's kind of gone back and forth throughout the day on how it's sort of going for conservatives. At some points, it seems like the court is siding with the mandates. Some points it seems like they're going to side against it. It's hard to tell at this point. We don't know exactly when that verdict is going to be handed down. But what we do know is that one of the leftist justices, Sonia Sotomayor, has made some incredibly ill-founded arguments that are, as Josh said, they're just crazy. There's no other way that you can possibly characterize those besides crazy. And so the first one is she was talking about how OSHA has the right to regulate a machine. So, for example, if a machine is malfunctioning, then OSHA is able to go and say, we have to have regulations in place to fix that machine.
So you're in an office and there's a machine that may set stuff on fire. OSHA can deal with it.
Right.
Okay.
So she's explaining this, and then she said a quote. I believe we have a tweet of it. She said a quote, and it was, quote, I'm sorry, wrong quote. She said, quote, where is it?
Did your 10% get cut off
Yeah, I
too?
think it did. I think my 10% also got cut off. But basically what she said was that how is regulating a machine that's spewing sparks any different from regulating a human who's spewing the virus? So essentially we should be regulated like machines because there's a virus that's happening. And so therefore we should be able to just tell humans that they have to get a vaccine or they have to do whatever it may be in order to make sure that this virus is not spreading. And I mean, I wouldn't be that surprised if some sort of far left person on Twitter or something says this. This is a justice of the Supreme Court. I think that's the shocking part of it.
Yeah.
This is somebody who's supposed to be one of the most...
you would hear this in high school.
Yeah. This is supposed to be one of the highest levels in the United States. And this is like the lowest level argument of somebody who just is a leftist in high school, in middle school, that just, read a book about communism and they like it. Or it's crazy.
Yeah. It's so dumb. I mean, I think it was her, or was it Kagan? One of them was talking too about COVID and Omicron and saying, oh, Omicron's just as deadly as Delta and there's like 100,000 kids on ventilators or something crazy like that. It's just like, you're a sitting Supreme Court justice. It's like, they're
spewing
so
media talking points.
Yeah, it's media talking points. I don't even know. It's so disappointing. Like,
you can wax super philosophical about this kind of stuff, but the first thing that occurred to me when you mentioned this story earlier is, if your worldview is that humans crawled out of a puddle of primordial goo, then we pretty much are machines. We're just kind of biologically driven machines. We're electrical just like machines are. And you can reduce humans to machines. They certainly view unborn babies that way. They view them as objects. So I think when you take special creation out of it, and there are plenty of people who are Christians, who are believers, who buy into evolution, and that's fine. But when you take special creation out of it, this idea that God designed us specifically and that we are special and we are set apart from the rest of creation, when you take that away, then we are virus. Let's just be honest. We are virus spewing, pooping machines. That's all. That's almost all we are.
Yeah.
And so, here you see these ideas that originated with Darwin in the 19th century. You see them popping out of a Supreme Court justice's mouth, and the implications are they're chilling. If you're a machine, if humans are machines, then you can do whatever you want to them.
Exactly.
Machines don't have inalienable rights, and we're not to the point yet where the left is arguing that they do. That means we don't. There's nothing special about us. It's terrifying. And what else? If that's the case, what else can they regulate us for? If we're like sparking machines, and that means they can give us a vaccine, what else can they do to us?
Right. A vaccine, I think, is only the first step in that sort of thinking. If you're going to start regulating everyone like a machine, a vaccine mandate, it seems horrible now. It's probably nothing compared to what they could do if they're going to start regulating every move of humans.
Or what is coming. Yeah. Well, something that has a far more profound effect on humanity than... and sometimes really dangerous effect on humanity, other than viruses, is simply procreation. If you can control people, if you can control the way what people put in their bodies to deal with the outcome of what comes out of their bodies, why can't you deal with reproduction? Yeah, I mean, it's a Supreme Court justice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the part that's crazy to me. And another point she made, Tara brought it up. I know we're running out of time. I'll just read the quote real quick. She said, quote, "We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators," talking about COVID. This is just a flat-out lie.
True. Yeah,
it's not true.
Is it?
According to the CDC, there has been 82,843 children hospitalized through the entire pandemic. And she said there are 100,000 children currently hospitalized. So you have a Supreme Court justice up there literally lying. I mean, just lying.
So we're 22 to 24 months into this at this point, and she takes the cumulative number of kids and uses it. And did she say it specifically regarding Omicron?
Yes. She was talking about Omicron. She also said that Omicron has a comparable death rate to the Delta variant, which is also false.
And didn't Fauci just admit what all conservatives have been saying all along, which was that children who are hospitalized or in the hospital with COVID is not the same as hospitalized because of COVID.
Right.
Oh,
and it's like, it's almost like everyone's been saying that for months.
Guys, that goes back to the story that we all kind of figured this was happening, but this goes back to the story that WJ ran, probably 20 months ago, maybe 18 months ago, about it was a meeting with the local health commissioner, I think, and they had two people in the county die, and they were put down as dead from COVID. And a reporter asked, "Okay, these people were listed as victims of COVID, but what did they die from?" And the commissioner said, "Well, one of them died in a motorcycle accident."
Yeah,
I mean that's what this is. That's what this is. There is seemingly no one on the left, at least no one with a microphone on the left, looking for actual truth here. Mm-hmm. I mean, am I wrong about that?
No, it's what you said earlier. It's about fear. The same idea that has to do with January 6th and the reason they want to instill fear with that. That's the same reason they want to instill fear here, and it's because they want to be able to tell us what to do, like machines. And if a bunch of people are afraid all the time, they're going to be much more likely to let the government do that.
That's good. So if you're going to walk away from this episode with one thing, I think the thing probably needs to be Justice Sotomayor thinks of us to some extent as machines that spew viruses.
Yep.
I mean, seriously, and that's one of the 9 people you want helping interpret the Constitution and the law.
I mean,
really?
It's people who think we live in a simulation. So
yeah,
I mean,
but that's more. That's a more reasonable line of thought, at least when laid out by somebody like Musk, than this idea that we're essentially machines that are dangerous to other machines, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're going to infect other machines.
I mean, it's anyway. All right, folks, great to be back with you. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us, or evening, depending on where you are in the country. Remember, we are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you're watching online, be sure to click the subscribe button, whether you're on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else you're finding us. Click the subscribe button. After you click that, there'll be a little bell that shows up somewhere on the page, probably close to the subscribe button. Click that. That'll make sure that you get notified when we go live. No shadow banning for us. It's a new year. We are excited about what's coming this year. We are also excited about figuring out how to fund everything that's coming this year. We exist because of God's grace, loyal readers, and the donations from people like you. And if you go to westernjournal.com/join, westernjournal.com/join, there are several ways there that you can partner with us and help to fund the journalism that we engage in, and to help us fight back against the left, against the media, against the godlessness that's out there. If you feel led to do that and to support us directly, thank you so much. If you don't, thank you still. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Please continue to do that. I think that's it for us. We're going to see you back here Monday afternoon, bright and kind of late in the afternoon. For Grant, for Tara, for everybody else here at WJ, I'm Josh Manning. We'll see you next week.